have with us a panel of esteemed experts who are at the forefront of digital finance and sustainability, led by our esteemed moderator, Mrs. Bénédicte Nolens, Center Head BIS's Innovation Hub, and the panelists from HKMA, from Goldman Sachs, HSBC, who will be steering an interesting dialogue. Please, thank you.
So hello everyone, and thank you to the organizers for bringing us together today. Green, of course, is a topic very dear to the hearts of many of us, and I recognize a lot of the faces in the audience. To me, green is a long journey. It's not a short journey. It's something you commit to in your life. It's not like someday you wake up and you do it. You do it for a long time. And so the people we have here have all now demonstrated their commitment to this topic, and specifically to bringing it together from a finance and a technology perspective. So we will be focused in this panel specifically on Hong Kong's green bond journey, the tokenized green bond journey that has happened over the past few years. And I would say in this regard, it is indeed, I think in total now, a 3-year journey, right? The first year was a study we did in the BIS Innovation Hub, actually in my center. The second year, we extended that study. So the first year, it was called Genesis 1.0. And it was focused on the retail side of things, which we've not reached yet. Maybe someday we will. Genesis 2.0 switched it to the institutional side, was done with, amongst others, Goldman Sachs, and Rosie is here. And then a year later, the Hong Kong government took it into a real bond issuance, and for this we have Georgina. And then the third or fourth step, you could say, is the second tokenized green bond offering of the Hong Kong government that was done recently, with also the involvement of HSBC and again Goldman Sachs and again the HKMA. And I would say this tokenized bond issuance is really significant on a global level. So I was kind of preparing for the panel and thinking about 6 billion Hong Kong dollars. That's pretty significant, right? That's like, I didn't do the exact calculation in US dollars, but obviously it's close to 900 million. Well, as of December, the total tokenized bond issuance in the world was actually close to 1 billion. So this would have actually single-handedly possibly doubled the volume of tokenized bond issuance actually in the world. And that it is a green bond is an added bonus, you could say, right? Because we're combining, as said, technology and green. So I think maybe a big kudos here to the Hong Kong government for having taken it this far. It's a tough journey. It's about pioneering, and as said, it takes a ton of commitment. So with that, I just want to pass it to you first, Georgina. So as said, it's for the second year in a row that the HKMA has brought to the market digital green bonds. So the question is, what motivated the HKMA to explore this tokenization of green bonds, and what do you think has been achieved with these 2 issuances so far?
Thanks, Bénédicte, for the great introduction. I think today's a really good occasion because we have all the key, players involved in our tokenization journey here on this panel. So the HKMA has been helping the government issue green bonds for a long time now. And what motivated us to try the tokenized green bond was really the potential of tokenization that we see in being able to enhance efficiency and transparency, as well as reduce cost. In recent years, we have seen tokenization gaining momentum and the industry moving beyond just the proof of concept phase to adoption and actual transactions. So we started off this journey, as you mentioned earlier, with working with your team, Bénédicte, on the Project Genesis in 2021 to really concept test the tokenized bond green bond concept. And we progressed into a real money transaction through our first tokenized government green bond issuance, Evergreen 1, in February last year. So for the first issuance, which we worked with Rosie's team on using Goldman's platform, was a really important one for us because it achieved 3 key things. First, it demonstrated the viability and conduciveness of Hong Kong's legal and regulatory framework in supporting tokenized issuances. Second, it drastically shortened the settlement cycle of the bond from to T+1 from the typical T+5. And third, DLT was successfully applied to the full bond's life cycle from primary issuance to coupon distribution, secondary trading settlement, and also maturity redemption. Actually, the bond just matured very smoothly earlier this month. And so riding on the success of Evergreen 1, we brought to the market another tokenized bond earlier this month, the Evergreen 2, which was supported by the HSBC platform. And as the Undersecretary mentioned earlier in his remarks this morning, in this offering, we were able to further streamline the issuance process by issuing a digitally native format, such that we do not have to lodge the bond with the traditional CSD first and then subsequently convert the bond into a digital format. Second, we were also able to issue in multiple currencies, including Hong Kong dollar, RMB, US dollar, and the euro. And third, we had been able to broaden the investor base for this bond by enabling investor access via the Central Money Markets Unit and its linkages with Euroclear and Clearstream, and using a largely business-as-usual process. And finally, we were able to enhance the transparency of the green bond disclosures associated with this bond by allowing investors to view certain green bond documents on the digital assets platform. So this summarizes the journey we have so far, and looking ahead, we do plan to try out more later on, which I'll talk a bit more later, but this is basically the journey we've had so far, the motivation behind our efforts.
Thank you so much, and I said thank you to the government and the HKMA for bringing the vision to life, because that's what it takes. Vision is always there, but life things are harder to get. So, Rosie, you were involved with us, the BISIH, in the vision stage, which was Genesis 2.0, and then later in the first HKMA issuance. If you could highlight to us what you think are the benefits and also the challenges. And in this regard, the HKMA did issue a report last year on bond tokenization, which you were closely involved with as well. So would be great to hear from you directly, objectively, the benefits, but also the challenges, because this is not a home run yet, I would say, right? We're at early phases. If the world is only at 1 billion, then we're at early phases, let's face it, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And thank you for having me on the panel. So I think, as mentioned, Goldman Sachs Digital Assets Platform was used for the inaugural bond issuance by the Hong Kong government in Feb last year, and also in the prototype project of Genesis 2.0, which was thinking about carbon forward development. I think fundamentally in the report that HKMA put out last summer, but also another research paper they put out in November of last year, has really looked at what are the quantifiable benefits that could be, and I use that word could very deliberately, gained from tokenization. So one which the Undersecretary and Georgina have already mentioned is thinking about enhanced settlement cycle. So how can you reduce to a T+1 cycle from a traditional T+5 market? I would highlight here that T+1 is not a technological limitation. Technically, you can do T+0. You can transact atomically. I think some of the limitations here come from having a full digital life cycle on chain. And this is one of the challenges or considerations. What about the digital cash leg? So this is a key component to consider. If you don't have the full life cycle on chain, you can't do things atomically. You can't do things in a T+0 settlement style. So this is a big consideration. I'll come back to the cash in a minute. I think another key benefit, and the HKMA cited this in their report, is efficiency gains. So they cited a 0.2 percentage point potential gain for underwriting fee reduction. So this is quite an interesting point that you could gain benefit here. Additionally, liquidity gains. So HKMA have cited that they think tokenized bonds versus conventional bond could exhibit higher liquidity for 5.3%. So this is quite interesting as well and goes to the point about investor access, but also potentially reducing fees, etc., associated by potential intermediaries. So these are some potential benefits specifically when we think about bond tokenization. I think more broadly when we think about tokenization, not limited to bonds, is just the fundamentals of blockchain. So blockchain provides a single immutable source of truth, as a lot of us know who are in this space, but this is increasingly important when we think about sustainable finance. When we think about provenance of assets, you need to have this immutable audit trail. So this is a really important concept, and I think is a key potential benefit for us when we think about green bonds and kind of green fintech more broadly. So I touched upon this in the cash leg, but I just want to come back to this when we think about challenges. We need to be really careful when we think about what is the cash leg, what is the evolution here, what are institutions going to be able to accept, what is the custody structure, and I know the government have put out some consultations about this as well, which is very interesting to see. What is going to be the legal standing of these tokens as well. So this is a very big consideration. I won't say necessarily challenge, but consideration to think about. And one of the final areas from a challenge perspective is interoperability. So I don't just mean interoperability on tokenization platforms, but interoperability with exchanges, with clearinghouses, with payment and settlement systems, with custodians, for example. And these are not all on-chain parties. So how are you able to interact with off-chain parties? And I think, and we'll kind of come on to this, but it's definitely going to be a phased approach. You need to be able to interact with off-chain systems. We're not going to be able to click our fingers and kind of all be on-chain tomorrow. So I think those are probably the key potential benefits and challenges that we should be considering, and we've seen exhibited in both Genesis and the HKMA's bonds.
Thank you very much. So Luying, HSBC just led the second tokenized bond on its platform. And could you maybe follow up on what Rosie said in terms of what you think you achieved with this second bond issuance?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you for having me here. On the second bond, I think as Georgina mentioned, there are actually a couple of breakthroughs since the first one. Currency-wise, we managed to issue a multi-currency tranche with US dollar 200 million, Euro 18 million, CNH 1.5 billion, and Hong Kong dollar 2 billion, totalizing about US dollar 750 million equivalent. Then you can see that this currency combination is actually really similar to any other green bond that issue in conventional format. So this is the world's first multi-currency digital green bond that it actually offers quite a lot of rooms for international and local investors to participate because we offer a multiple currency platform for them to really be able to fit their investment portfolio. The second would be the clearing structure that also Georgina touched on. So this is the first time where we use the CMU clearing system, which is managed by Hong Kong MA, and also with the linkage to Euroclear and Clearstream, which is also the first bank-based platform, would be able to link with international clearing systems. So this also provides a lot of convenience for investors would be able to invest in this bond. So a combination of the above advanced structure and also lots of the investor development work that we have been doing since Genesis 1.0, Genesis 2.0, we actually see a wide range of investors are able to participate in this Hong Kong green bond in digitalization format. So I would say that coming from the bond perspective, the significant breakthrough for the second one would be to able to include a wide range of investors of different type, which is really similar to what would be who would normally be able to invest in the Hong Kong green bond. From the green side, we would say that it actually continues our high-quality green project selection, supporting the livable city and sustainable development of Hong Kong, and even more importantly, be a regional and global Green Finance Hub as well as FinTech Hub, a really good combination of combining both the green concept as well as the digital concept.
Great. So thank you very much. And as said, we should just look at this as hugely significant, not just for Hong Kong, but globally. So now I want to turn a little bit to the views on future adoption. So Georgina, these bonds, I said, they were a combination of green and digitalization. So question to you as to whether you could comment on the broader potential in your view of tokenization in capital markets and green finance, and how you see the prospects of broader market adoption, and what could be done to further unlock the potential of tokenization in Hong Kong as a green and fintech center.
Thanks, Bénédicte. I think overall, I guess, with the market, so globally, 1 billion you mentioned, I think in general, tokenized bond is still quite nascent compared to the broader capital markets. And we expect broader adoption would probably take time. But we also hope that through these two issues that we did, that we can create some demonstrative effect to the market that will encourage more, market participants to look into this area and the potential that this could bring. And this is one of the reasons why we published the report that Rosie mentioned last year based on our first tokenized issuance, to really share our experience and highlight some of the issues that we might look at as the government and also the industry as a whole into addressing in order to promote wider adoption. And so some of the things that we mentioned that could be done, besides, potentially further raising the efficiency from the inaugural issuance that Rosie mentioned, is also exploring further use cases. So, we tried different currencies this time in the second issuance, and also we tried to integrate green bond disclosures in the digital assets platform. So what are the further use cases that we can try out, in our future projects? And also another big issue Rosie mentioned is interoperability, and also addressing fragmentation across platforms and systems. We tried this time in the second issuance to link the issuance with the CMU, the existing financial market infrastructure. But what more can we do on top of that? We also adopted the ICMA's bond data taxonomy, which promotes automation, and machine readable language on bond information for our issuance. But what more can we do that? And one of the it was good. What worked for us, is involving a lot of same players in the first and second issuance. Both Goldman and HSBC were on this on our projects, both of our projects, and really facilitate information exchange and learning from each other's experiences. And through that, how we work on further promoting this sort of interoperability in the market. And also finally, exploring ways to further enhance the existing legal and regulatory framework. We demonstrated that it's workable, but are there ways that we can further enhance, or provide some templates or examples, for the market to make reference to? So these are the areas, the key areas that we'll be looking at as we think about the future path of our tokenization journey and what next to do with the government green bond and how to do more like tokenization on this front. Great.
So, Anthony, can I give it a time check? Because I noticed that we started a bit late, right?
We can carry on according to
So we just continue, right? Okay. So, Rosie, you mentioned the overall potential benefits of bond tokenization depend on industry-wide utility adoption. Can you give us a bit of further kind of insight on this?
Yeah, sure. And so I think Georgina also touched on this, but tokenization isn't a panacea. It's not the answer to everything. So I think we do need to be quite careful when we think about the use cases and adoption. But importantly, who's adopting, how are they adopting, and kind of what are they using the technology for? So if you as a single organization are doing kind of digital bond issuances by yourself, you're not going to have the maximum efficiency gains that you would have if the settlement system is also leveraging the same technology, the exchange, etc. So you need to be speaking the same language. And until we have this utility of tokenization, we're not going to be able to gain the maximum efficiency and maximum benefit. And so I think it's the point that Georgina made, making sure we're adopting international standards, making sure we're kind of able to talk to our competitors, work with our competitors and our peers on these types of projects together is so important. It's kind of the friendly competition angle that we all want, but it brings maximum benefit to the market. I think the other thing that is important, and I mentioned this, is in the near term, we need to be able to interact with traditional infrastructure. We need to be able to communicate via SWIFT, for example. We need to be able to speak to local CSDs or international CSDs that are potentially not using blockchain technology. So I think the key is we're not going to see adoption worldwide across all use cases overnight. We need to appreciate that. And I think, Bénédicte, when we were speaking before, you were saying tokenization has been around for 10 years or something when we were looking at kind of prior issuances. So we're not quite there yet when it comes to full adoption, but I think we're definitely making positive strides in the right direction. Positive consultations are coming out of Hong Kong and other markets in terms of the asset side, but also the cash leg opportunities. And the cash leg opportunities, thinking about legal infrastructure, regulatory obligation, holding regimes, etc., all of this, which is very important to safeguard the institutions that will be potentially custodying these assets. And so just thinking through what is the fundamental infrastructure, be it legal, regulatory, technology, that we need to put in place so this could be a utility in the future.
Thank you. And yes, that's just for the tokenized bonds, right? There are some examples of tokenized money market funds that are getting pretty significant. And let's not ignore that there is the unregulated world who has made and continues making a lot of progress on tokenization of assets. So this is just one element of tokenization, but we shouldn't forget there's a lot more going on as well. Okay, so Luying, could you maybe give us your insight on a similar question? So paving the way for further digitization in bond markets, what do you think can follow?
Yeah, I think I really would like to agree with what Rosie mentioned. So a product would only be able to achieve its full potential if more people are using. So from the digital bond concept, we developed it from Genesis 1 to Genesis 2. We developed it on paper to a real product and now evolve into a multi-currency. And then I think a very encouraging factor is that when we are doing investor work, many of the investors are now able to purchase a digital bond. And for the ones who are still on their learning curve, they're actually really active in exploring to adding this capacity. So we feel like the investor receptiveness for the second digitalization bond, it is better than the first one, of course, because the market evolved. And then I think another important aspect is that we believe that Hong Kong MA has been doing a great job in writing an easy-to-use menu for the other issuer to follow. So by rights, the digitalization platform, no matter whether it's the Goldman one or the HSBC one, can be applied to any sector and conceptually also any currency, depending on the clearing capacity. We are actually receiving inquiry from issuers around Asia, also around globally, to try to learn into this case study and see how they can utilize that into their own country or region. So I think, as Rosie mentioned, the regulatory, the legal challenge could be quite different from different jurisdictions. However, the way that how we work digitalization bond from the on-paper concept to a single currency transaction to a multiple currency transaction distributed widely to a wide range of investors is actually a very good menu for all of us to follow. And then we will also actively marketing this concept to other issuers in the region and globally as well, in order to really amplify the digitalization platform. I think the last point I would like to mention is that I am a green expert. I am head of sustainable bonds in HSBC, and I started doing green bonds about 10 years ago, where the green bond market is only US $15 billion issuances. And now the green bond market is already over 1 trillion issuances globally. So it really reminds me about the green concept, how the green bond developed when we have lots of challenge, but lots of pioneers like the international banks in the beginning. And now it reminds me about the journey about digital bond. Maybe it would be really similar to the green bond market. It starts from small, but really impactful transaction like the HKMA one, and then growing into a massive market like the green bond nowadays. So we just need to give it a little bit more time. For green bonds, it takes 10 years. I'm hoping that for digital bonds, it would take significantly less than that, because we are actually evolving at a much faster pace.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree with you. And this was actually one of the reasons why when I started the BIS Innovation Hub, we looked at green bonds in the tokenized concept and context, because I knew that growth in green bonds. So sometimes people still criticize green bonds because they say, okay, the monitoring is not completely there. But I look at it from the bright side in this regard, is without coming up with this green bond concept, we would be much further from green finance today than we are now, as you said, with 1 trillion issuances. So it's a very significant area for green is the bond side of things. And maybe because some of you touched on the cash legs, maybe I can kind of say a couple of things there. So in Genesis 1, we already thought about the cash leg, and already we faced the challenge that cash leg is still done in traditional fashion. We therefore compared doing it versus connecting with existing infrastructure or doing it via stable coins. That's what we did in Genesis 1. And in fact, both can be done. Of course, one is superior to the other in terms of overall digitization. Since the BISIH has also continued its journey together with the HSBC, with the HKMA on other aspects of digitizing the currency. And in particular, we've worked with the HKMA closely and with 3 other central banks on wholesale CBDC in a cross-border context. Eventually, that can be used for DVP as well. In the current phase, not yet. This is called the Enbridge project. But it's meant to be for cross-border payment. And as said, if you can do that PVP, you can do that DVP. So it's just a matter of time before we reach an MVP with that Enbridge project. And then once we reach MVP in maybe a year thereafter, we could think about DVP in the context of Enbridge. Separately, the HKMA continues working on this exact question around wholesale CBDC for settlement. And this will be also a continuing journey, so expect more information in that regard. And so to come back to the criticism, indeed, that we had heard on green bonds, the criticism is you can't actually see if the bond proceeds are being used really for green projects. That actually motivated Genesis 1 and even more so Genesis 2, which, Rosie, you were involved with. So I'd appreciate, Rosie, if you can give us a bit of look into the future as to how you think we can use this blockchain provenance and tracking capability for example, carbon credits. I also see a future of using AI for monitoring of the use of proceeds, for example. So if you can elaborate on that a little bit, and Luying, same question to you. So that's taking the question of technology away from the issuance itself into the monitoring of the use of proceeds of the bond, so that you can really be sure it is a green bond.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what we were looking at very specifically for Genesis 2, is how can you leverage blockchain, IoT devices, satellite data, etc., as aids to support the asset that you've issued, to really be able to track the financed assets. So be this a solar power plant, be it a kind of new development or regrowth project, etc. So how can you embed that provenance information into the digital security, into the digital asset that's been issued? And I think blockchain is a fantastic enabler for that. Blockchain, as I mentioned before, kind of immutable source of truth. You can leverage smart contract automation to be able to instigate certain rule-based transaction settlement actions atomically. And these can be based on KPIs that the project sets out and the product sets out in the first instance. This can potentially, therefore, provide strength and credibility of the green bond or other such sustainable finance product. But also you can then have that real-time monitoring. That real-time monitoring comes with a potential catch. You need to make sure that's obviously audited data, verified data. Blockchain can be the rails to translate that and to pass that through to the necessary parties, be them asset owners or investors alike. But you need to make sure there's some sort of credibility underlying, so taking from multiple sources, verifying against different data sets, etc., which is very important. But blockchain can provide the rails to do so. So I think for the sustainable finance space, I mentioned before, provenance is key. Blockchain can be an enabler for that. And I think just the final thing is really thinking about, and we're seeing this a lot in Europe, and Asia is also starting to have a lot more regulation, but there are very clear regulations coming out in EMEA in terms of what asset owners and investors need to be declaring and showcasing in terms of what they're investing, what they're owning in, coming from last year, this year, for future reporting periods. So this type of information is not a nice to have, it's a must have. And so issuers do need to start thinking about how can they be more transparent, how can they provide access to investors for this information. So I think we're only going to see more projects coming out in this space, but maybe Luying can add to that.
Yeah, indeed. I think when we have been progressing quite a lot on the digitalization on the bond front, but in terms of the digitalization on the green front, there are indeed quite a lot of steps that we can visualize that is going to happen, because we do see some other issue in some other region, for example, in Japan are doing. So I think, firstly, I think as Rosie mentioned, so in the green bond market and as every bond market, the transparency has been extremely important, especially in terms of green bond, because the investor do want to need to report, or they would like to know the green impact that their money are investing in a project into. So we have already seen a digitalization green bond issue in Japan by the private sector, who is able to actually track the green impact using a digitalization format. So in that situation, the investor partly would include the retail population as well, would be able to continue monitoring the green progress and then to quantify the impact of what their money are doing. So it sounds quite a difficult or complex process, but it made me think about when Simon mentioned that we are going to be given a tree after this event where we would be able to track the location via GPS and then see its growth. So it's actually really similar process. So using the digitalization infrastructure just to ensure that data transparency is on top, and then in ensuring investor would be able to really get the real benefit from that. I think that's the first. The second, I think we briefly touch on, there are other monetizing ways for the green impact. For example, the carbon credit, which has been a hugely rapidly developing market globally. So we are hoping that one day we would be able to monetize the impact in a carbon credit form or other form, and then also bring it back into the digitalization and financial world in order to ensure that what we are doing today, it is not only good for the environment, but also making economical and commercial sense for the investor to really able to balance their portfolio return.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I didn't know about Japan bond, by the way, so I'll ask you for the detail on that one. But indeed, that's where we started with Genesis 1, is to think that this can be a bond offering to retail so that retail can see the full impact of the use of proceeds. And so that we can, let's say, further the community efforts around the awareness of green, because it's really quite crucial. I would also note that in terms of additional technologies that can be used for monitoring the use of proceeds, as mentioned, it includes AI, but it also includes IoT. And around that topic, the BISIH actually worked last year with COP28 to do a tech sprint. So you could take a look online. For example, we have a report on the applicants, and in particular the 15 shortlisted candidates for that COP28 tech sprint. It's fully transparent. And before I move to the closing question, which is looking into the crystal ball, I just want to say a couple of firsts here. First of all, I think this is the first time in my life, and I've done many panels, I think this is the first time that an opening panel has only women. So thank you, Hampton. I think you said a first, at least for me. Okay. Secondly, as said at the beginning, the total issuance for Hong Kong is over 850 million US dollars. And if the figure I saw is accurate around tokenization being around 1 billion, then that is nearly, as said, single-handedly nearly doubling, not fully doubling, but it's important. Also for us as a BISIH, it was the Genesis projects was actually the first projects with which we managed to go to COP28, sorry, COP27 at the time in Sharm el-Sheikh. And we worked with the UN actually to achieve that concept, because the Genesis 2.0 concept was in the global divide between the North and the South, and the need for funding in the South. The UN actually thought very strongly that unless there is the automation of the use of proceeds, that it would be very difficult to fund the green transition for the South, for example. So that was the UN connection, and I said we made it to COP27, and Rosie was there. I would also say she was pregnant at the time, so both preparing for Genesis 2.0 and for the first bond for the Hong Kong government apparently was the length of 2 pregnancies. So that's also, I would say, a first. So many firsts here, and keep in mind we're really pioneering, so let's continue to pioneer for Hong Kong. And Georgina, maybe the last question to you before we close the panel is, if you were to look into the crystal ball, having heard as well from Rosie and Luying as to connection to other tech, but if you were to look into the crystal ball, I said the tokenization journey is actually a very long one, but if you think about blockchain and tokenization, I put it at around 10 years already with Ether and Ethereum coming around, right? So if you looked ahead, how far can you look ahead and what do you see? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and what do you expect?
Well, it's hard to put an exact number on the number of years, but obviously I hope things will come sooner rather than later. But if we're going to look ahead, say, 5, 10 years or 10, 20 years or whatnot. From a market development perspective, what I really want to see is, tokenization being a very easily accessible option for market participants, for issuers or investors, by achieving the issues that we mentioned earlier, interoperability and also integration, seamless integration, not only with existing financial market infrastructure, but also like services like tracking services, new technologies, and putting all these missing pieces together and making this a viable option, easy to access for investors, because that is, why we want to do market development, right? Enriching the ecosystem such that Hong Kong can play its role in being the green and sustainable finance hub for not only investors and issuers in Hong Kong, but also for the region and for the world.
Thank you. So does anybody have a question? Yes. Oh, okay. You first.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just have one question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very insightful discussions. So I have one question about the development of tokenization. So I very much agree that blockchain is very useful for tracking purpose. But what came to in my mind, if the digitalization process is already very good enough, so do we really need tokenization? Because we can still use the blockchain technology for tracking all the things, to authenticate all the things. So do we still need tokenization? So is it good enough to have digitalization with blockchain technology? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think, as I said, tokenization is not a panacea. It's not the answer to everything. It may be that portions of the life cycle, and I'm kind of not sure specifically the example that you're talking about there, might be able to leverage tokenization, but other portions simply need blockchain as rails to support transaction information, to support data mobility, etc. So no, I don't think tokenization is the kind of use case for everything or solution for everything, but I think it can be enabler for certain use cases. It can support the development and kind of furthering of the market. And I think it's an important concept for the market to be able to grasp as a fundamental to understand what blockchain is and what blockchain can do.
I appreciate the experts. Thank you so much for the experts' wisdoms. I can understand that the tokenization of bonds or money market had liquidity gain, efficiency gain, but the financial market have been developed so many years, right? So the marginal gain of tokenization seems to be not that big. So I just want to know whether the government, Hong Kong MA, or the industry talk about RWA type of tokenization. It seems it is more fundamental. Just want to know. That is the real world asset type of tokenization. That seems to be more important, or in terms of liquidity gain or efficiency gain, that seem to be even larger. So want to know how the government, the Hong Kong MA, and the industry experts feel along this line. Thanks.
So maybe I can answer and then hand to Georgina as well. So in some, I think you need to see all of this as a learning journey. I would go back to Genesis 2.0, where in fact what we did was conceptually, right? The coupon was carbon credits. The coupon was not cash. The coupon was carbon credits that were created through renewable energy that was tracked on blockchain. And so those carbon credits were delivered via smart contract as well to the bondholders. So to have a front-to-end full integration of digitization was actually the target with Genesis 2. So it wasn't just the tokenized placement, it was also the tracking on blockchain and then the ultimate delivery of the carbon credit rather than a cash coupon. So to keep that in mind. And in terms of real-world assets, the evolution of the blockchain sector is really an interesting one, right? It all started with Bitcoin, then it evolved to Ether, it evolved to ICOs, it evolved to stablecoins, it evolved to very big markets, some of which have collapsed, as we know. Then it has evolved into Web3, where a lot of digital assets are being created in the form of NFTs and ordinals and are being sold and bought every day in very large amounts of actual money if you needed to put it in non-Bitcoin or non-Ether terms. And so the latest evolution is the focused on real-world assets, right? So real-world assets, if you tokenize them, let's say I'm going to tokenize a building in Central and you can buy tokens, And I'm not here to speak for the SFC, but I did work for the SFC many years ago. It can easily become an investment scheme, right? It becomes very close to a real estate, a REIT de facto. So I think for those who are interested in RWAs, or real-world asset tokenization, I think the good thing is there is actually existent regulatory framework. Maybe the bad thing is you're going to have to comply with it if it exists. But it's not the journey of needing to wait for a new regime, highly likely. Either you fall in it or you fall out of it. And if you fall out of it, then you don't need to comply with it. If you fall in it, you'll need to comply with it. But as said, government is going to focus more on wholesale CBDC, for example, so how to settle for these kind of things. So I think more work will be done in that space. But if you see specific questions on RWAs, you should raise them. Yes. Question?
I think today's discussion is very focused on tokenized bond, but I think our efforts are broader than that. You know, there are many things going on in terms of exploring the potential of different technologies. So I want to say, you know, today's discussion is very focused, but on bonds itself, but that we are making efforts in exploring the potential for other technologies, how it could improve, you know, the efficiency and provide cost-saving gains for the industry and the further development of the financial markets.
I think you have one more question.
Oh, I don't know if it's on. Okay, just one more question. I very much appreciate, of course, the panel talking about this current situation, but you were at COP27 and probably COP28 as well. I just came from there in Dubai, and also at 27. And of course, loss and damage of this funding of the global south, particularly, does this tokenization of the environment, does the speech about you know, how are we raising money for through real world assets? Is there anything in your efforts as a kind of a blockchain on-ramp, a way to inform regular people outside of the financial area about how this world is changing and how they can participate in the tokenization of their world as well, the world we share, in the ways that, for instance, the planting trees, you know, this starts to, we start to realize that all of this financial activity supposedly is to improve our world and improve our relationship with our natural world. So I just want to thank you for your and if you have an answer for it, it's too long of an answer, I'm sure, but please join us in Conscience Land, and we really are anxious to work with you to share this message of how do we present our loss and damage money? How is the money that's collected getting to the people? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I can't comment specifically on loss and damage, right? But what I can say is, I said that Genesis 2.0 was specifically focused on helping the global, on creating a concept for how the global south can raise funds for their let's say, building of renewable infrastructure, you could say. Secondly, we did do the COP28 tech sprint, and as mentioned, we have 15 companies that are listed there, that each of them provided innovative ideas. I would say we were looking for the overlap with the banking sector, so not an individual planting a tree, though I very much appreciate what Anton is doing there. And so to go to that third aspect, I do think there is an enormous intersection actually with the unregulated side of blockchain land, you could say, in terms of helping a lot of these things that you're speaking about. And as Anton also already demonstrated with satellite monitoring and all these kind of technologies. So I think a lot more opportunities there, both in let's say, big finance and maybe small retail finance and funding. Thank you all. I think that says 0, so we have to stop it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists and for the moderator for an invigorating discussion. Thank you so much. You can take your seat. And let's carry the